What's up guys, and welcome back to the SubaruONLY channel. Today's gonna be a vlog style video where I do some rough video, some rough footage, and I'm gonna introduce a Subaru topic in every one of these videos. In today's video, I'm gonna revisit my 1993 Subaru Legacy. It's a front wheel drive, 5-speed model, and it's got that 2.2 liter naturally aspirated motor, which is actually a great motor, and it's a non-interference motor. So if I have the timing belt brake on this motor, I don't have to worry about it. First, I'm going to give you a little tour of the car. I'm going to walk through all the suspension, the interior, and the engine bay of this car. And we're just going to give you a little tour of this car because this 1993 Legacy is actually a quintessential 90s Subaru. And this one is in completely original condition. And it's pretty rare to see a car that's in such good condition and in completely original condition. So I think this would be a really cool subject to dive into for today's vlog. This is my little SubaruONLY shop. It's a DIY Subaru channel. It's a channel where all I do is Subaru builds and race Subaru vehicles at motorsport events. It's a DIY themed channel where I walk you guys through the steps to get your Subarus back on the road and hopefully do a little racing of your own. So thanks for checking out the video, guys. I really appreciate it. Okay, I'll start by giving you guys a nice 360 walk around. As you guys have probably already noticed, I actually have the spoiler from a Subaru Legacy turbo model. I believe they're called Legacy Sport models. And that's actually an original Subaru Legacy Turbo OEM spoiler with that third brake light in it. Although that third brake light isn't actually hooked up, and as you can see, I've got some paint issues. But overall, this car is in really good condition. As I walk around it, another thing you'll notice is I actually have these WRX wheels. These are WRX wheels from, I believe, a 2003, 2004 WRX. And I also have painted them completely white so that they match the exterior of this car. And if I look a little closer, you guys are also going to notice that these actually have snow tires on them. That gives it a really nice kind of gnarly tread pattern. And I don't use this car very often, so I just leave these snow tires on it. Anytime it's rainy out, or if I want to use this car as a backup car for rally crossing, those snow tires actually work perfect. So let's take a little walk around from this 1993 front wheel drive Subaru Legacy. Since it's a naturally aspirated model, as you can see in the hood, there's no hood scoop. The turbo models actually have a really small hood scoop that allows for air to pass in and cool that engine. But this is a naturally aspirated model, so it doesn't have that hood scoop. As I walk around it, you can see that it's in really good condition. The body's in great condition. It's got all the original molding on it. It's got those chrome door handles, pretty common in the cars from the 90s. And then it's got the matching chrome trim on the top. It transitions right to satin black right here. So chrome right here and satin black right here, which to me is a little bit of an odd thing to go for from a design standpoint. But that's another thing that's kind of cool about these, is that these A-pillars are actually blacked out completely, right? So you have this sucker is actually black, or at least satin black, and then this is satin black, and then you have the white roof, and you have the white body of the car. So as you step back, as you can see, all the window area and all the perimeter around the car where the windows are has all been blacked out. And that's by design from Subaru. That was actually part of their design element of this car. And if you had all these windows tinted, you could really see that it would be all black in that midsection and then just be white on the roof and then white on the body side of the car, which would look pretty cool. All right, and that's about it from the exterior. The only other thing I'll add on the exterior is that the muffler is not the OEM muffler. I actually have an aftermarket exhaust system on this car where I've removed the resonator and I've replaced that muffler with a high flow aftermarket muffler. There's a shot of that aftermarket muffler on the car. And like I said, the resonator has been deleted, so all the sound is pretty much resonated by this sucker right here. And it sounds damn good, especially when you're getting in it. High in the RPMs on this sucker, close to the red line. This motor sounds great. Okay, we'll step on inside to the car. Okay, let's go ahead and get inside this car, and forgive all the racket out here. I'm actually in my driveway. It's not a studio lot. So this is the interior of the car. As you can see, it's that vintage blue interior from the 90s Subaru. And then what the heck is this? That's right, it's an automatic seatbelt. So as soon as you turn that key to the on position, this sucker is going to engage and it's going to slide back and lock in your front shoulder harness. I'll show you guys how that works right now. Oh yeah, let me grab the keys. Key. Grab your key, put it in the ignition, turn it to the on position. I'll hold off though, and as soon as I put it to the on position, it's going to engage. Bam. So this is the 90s interior. I've got the automatic shoulder harness. It has engaged and locked me in my seatbelt position. As you can see, it's at 5-speed manual right here. Here's our original shifter with a 5-speed. Again, excuse the noise, this is not a studio lot. I have my neighbors with their Harley Davidsons pulling into the driveway for their annual weekend cruise. So as you can see, the dash is good. It's all blue. There's no cracks in it whatsoever. It's in perfectly good condition, pretty vintage. I'm actually missing the little surround for this door handle. It's been like that since I got it. I'm actually missing the little plastic triangle cover for this guy. That's the way I got it too. And there's a whole story on this car. I got this car for $500 and the guy was asking $1,200, but there was a terrible knock coming from the front of the engine. And I'll tell you guys the whole story later when I'm popping the hood. But just know I got this car super cheap. That's why it's a great little backup car. So these are the seats. Let me get you a good angle of the front seats so you can kind of see all these kind of classic blue seats from Subaru. They're good condition. They work just fine. I've done long road trips in them. I did actually replace the speakers and I painted this surround thing with satin black color, but it was actually missing the foam behind it so you can still see the speaker through the little metal grate. I don't care about that. That's just fine. When I bought this car, it actually had an aftermarket CD player and I wanted the original vintage Subaru, so I went online on eBay and I bought this vintage wideband Subaru tape deck and I installed it. And I'm probably one of the only people in the last fucking decade that have pulled out a CD player and installed a tape deck in place of it. But I actually got some tapes and it's kind of cool to listen to your old tapes anyways. And then of course the 5-speed, like I said, you got that 5-speed with the vintage shift knob. This is the OEM shift knob and shift boot. I really like these early 90s shift boots, these rubber shift boots. They're super classic, vintage Subaru. And you got your center e-brake, and I actually don't have the button in this sucker. One of the rallycross events from a couple years ago, I was ripping my helmet off real fast to grab my time slip, and I threw the helmet down and I knocked that button and it snapped the button in half, and ever since I haven't had a e-brake or parking brake. Center console. That works fine. Power windows, power door locks. As you guys can see right there, there's a cruise button and the rear defoggers. It's got the AC that works just fine. That's about it. What do you say we fire this sucker up? And fires right up, purrs like kidding. So as you can see, the mileage on this car is at about 226,000 miles. And I've had the car for probably about 30,000 of those miles, and it's run perfect ever since I fixed it from the last owner that I got it from, and I'll tell you that story when I pop the hood. Steering wheel, the original Subaru steering wheel, and there is actually a crack in the rubber cover right here of that Subaru steering wheel, kind of annoying. 5-speed manual, hell of a lot of fun. It's got that front wheel drive, and when I finally get around to it, I really want to install a limited slip in the front differential. That way I've got traction from both front tires, because right now when you really get into it, you only have traction with one tire. Okay, what do you say let's go ahead and pop the hood and I'll give you guys a tour of the engine bay. All right, and here's that 2.2 liter naturally aspirated motor. As you guys can probably see immediately, I actually have an aftermarket air intake on it. That's this sucker right here, bam. And I actually have them zip tied right here to the corners. That way it doesn't move around a lot when I do rallycross. Because you actually don't want to have your mass airflow sensor. That's what this is right here, your mass airflow sensor. You don't want to have this thing banging around and unsupported when you're going to go to rallycross or any kind of other event where you're on rough road surfaces. So anytime you're doing any off-roading or any kind of rough driving, make sure that mass airflow sensor is securely locked in place. As you can see, mine's totally locked down because I have it zip tied down here and up over here. And it's got a smooth path to go and transition into the throttle body, into my intake manifold. And as you guys can see, as I kind of zoom in down here, I don't have any leaks coming from these valve covers. And this engine is really pretty clean for being a 1993. And we're talking about a 26-year-old motor. So this thing's looking phenomenal. Another thing you'll probably notice is I have this strut tower brace. That is actually the Subaru factory STI carbon fiber strut tower brace that came on the GC models, and it fits on these Legacies as well. Maybe it was on the Legacies too, and I don't know, but it definitely was on the IMPREZA STIs. So take a look at this carbon fiber strut tower brace up close. It's titanium and carbon fiber, I believe. I believe these end plates are made out of titanium, and then of course the bars right here are carbon fiber. And I'll give you guys a nice little pan over shot of this strut tower brace because this thing is gorgeous. Excuse the sound, we're out in the public. Bam. STI, Fiji Heavy Industries, Aerospace Division. Legit, OEM. Bam. Okay guys, so what's the story behind getting this 1993 front-wheel drive 2.2 liter Subaru Legacy for $500? Okay, so 2 or 3 years ago, I was cruising on Craigslist like I always do, and I was looking for old Subarus and I was looking for deals on Subarus. And this is actually before Facebook Marketplace, so there was no option out there for Facebook Marketplace. It was really just Craigslist, and That's really the only place people are going to buy, cheap cars. So I'm cruising on Craigslist one night and I see this sucker come up for I think $1,200, $1,250. And I was like, okay, it's a 93 Subaru Legacy, but it's front wheel drive. That's probably why it's so cheap, because it's probably a little bit below market value. The body was in real good condition. The guy in the ad said that the engine was in good condition, and I think he said it had somewhere like 180,000, 190,000 miles. And I'd always loved these white first-gen Subaru Legacies, so it instantly jumped out at me. And even though it was a front-wheel drive, and I was kind of turned off by the fact it was a front-wheel drive, because who wants a front-wheel drive Subaru? Either you get an all-wheel drive Subaru or nothing. That's the whole point of a Subaru. But this thing was front-wheel drive, it was a 5-speed manual, and it was white, which is the color I love for these first-gen Subarus. And I hadn't really seen a lot of clean ones come on the market in quite some time. So this was the first clean, white, first-gen Subaru Legacy had come on the market. And even though it was a front-wheel drive, at least it was a 5-speed transmission, and that pretty much made this one of the cars I've been keeping an eye out for a while. So I cruised down to see the guy. I think it was like a 30 or 45 minute drive. It was actually definitely a 45-minute drive, because I remember I was on pins and needles on the way home. And the reason I was will definitely come clear as I share the rest of the story. So I cruised down about 45 minutes away, and I cruise up to the spot we're gonna meet the guy, and he cruises up in the car, and as soon as he cruises up, I hear a little bit of a knock sound coming from that engine. So I'm like, okay, what's up? In the ad, he said it ran perfectly, and now the guy's pulling up, and we met in some residential neighborhood. So I take a closer look at the car. The interior, as you saw, is just like I bought it. It was in perfect condition. It's all original. It's got the original dash with no cracks. It's got the original seats. It's got the original interior. It was looking really good. As a matter of fact, the only thing that wasn't original was that aftermarket CD player. And it was some janky Pioneer aftermarket CD player from the 90s. So I knew I was gonna get rid of that sucker. But everything else in the car was totally original. And it actually had blown shocks, and it had black steel rims on it. It looked kind of crappy, and all the paint was worn away and it was half rusted. So basically it had ghetto looking black rims on it, it had blown shocks, and it had that janky 90s Pioneer CD player in it. But other than that, the car was in really good condition. Actually, it also had those AutoZone, like fake flames on the side, and I think maybe one of those AutoZone's little louver, chromed plastic louvers that have adhesion tape on the back that you basically stick on your car. So it had like one of those ghetto looking fake louvers on it. It had some flames on it. I don't know what the hell the previous owner was thinking, but the rest of the car looked pretty good. I knew that there was something good underneath all this jankiness. So took a close look at it, had the guy pop the hood, he fired up the engine, and sure enough, there was this knock sound. It wasn't like a knock that was coming from the lower part of the engine, so I didn't actually think that it was part of the crankshaft, because you could clearly hear that that knock was coming from the top half of the engine. And when I went around it and I kind of really tried to look and listen where that knock was coming from, it wasn't coming from the valve covers, so it didn't seem like it was part of the valve train. It wasn't coming from the back of the engine, so it didn't have anything to do with the transmission input shaft or anything like that. It was clearly a discernible knock coming from the front of the engine, literally right below the alternator, right where the timing components are. And you could just clearly hear that knock, and it was definitely like a metallic knock, just a sharp metallic knock sound. That knocking frequency would increase proportionally with the RPM of the engine. So this was something kind of odd. I wasn't quite sure what it was. And then the guy started telling me what had been done on the car recently. And he told me that he actually just had the timing belt replaced, all the pulleys replaced, and that hydraulic tensioner replaced. And in addition to that, he said the knock sound came immediately after he left the shop from having that new timing belt and all those timing belt components installed. He swore up and down that the engine had no knock before he went in there to have that timing belt changed, and as soon as they changed that timing belt, all of a sudden the car had developed a knock from that upper area. And to me, that just didn't make any sense at all. That definitely couldn't be a rod bearing, it definitely couldn't be one of your main crank bearings, it wasn't a valve train, and the sound was definitely coming from the front of the engine, right where those timing components were. So there was definitely a red flag here that that shop that had done that timing belt and those pulleys and that hydraulic tensioner had done something wrong, and maybe that's what was causing that knock sound. But the kid was freaked out. He thought he didn't know if he had a blown head gasket, if he had a spun rod bearing. He didn't know what the hell he had. He just knew that his car had a horrible knock sound, that this shop had charged him hundreds of dollars to do a timing belt job, and the car just had this terrible knock sound ever since paying the shop to do the timing belt job. So I took a look at it, and to be honest, I was convinced it wasn't the valve train, I was convinced it wasn't the transmission, I was convinced it wasn't the lower rotating assembly, so it wasn't the crank or the rods, and it had to do something with those timing components that that shop had installed. So basically, I looked at the guy and I said, look, I don't know what's wrong with this car. It does seem like it has something to do with that timing components, but if they screwed something up with the timing components, it could easily break something else in the engine, even though it was running fine at this moment. And that I really wasn't comfortable paying the asking price of $1,200 or $1,250. And that since he didn't advertise that this car had this terrible knock sound, and he didn't put it in the ad. He basically said in the ad that the car was running perfect. And that was a slightly inaccurate description of the car. Although the car ran fine, the fact that it had that metallic knock, and it was a loud knock that you could hear from outside the engine area with the hood down and everything, I wouldn't really describe that car as running perfectly, and that's how he had described it in the ad. So he kind of had put up a false ad for the car, and I basically subtly and respectfully kind of said, you know, this car isn't exactly as advertised, so I'm not comfortable paying that $1,200 or $1,250. To be honest with you, I'm taking a bit of a risk buying this car, and I really wouldn't be comfortable buying it for anything more than, let's say, $500. And honestly, this is one of the only times it's ever happened in my life, before I could finish saying the word dollars, at the end of that sentence, I think I can only pay $500. Before I could finish saying the word dollars, he says yes. He cuts me off saying yes, deal. And I don't know if you guys have ever dealt with anybody that basically cuts you off when you're offering them a lowball price and says yes. But to me, I was a little freaked out by this guy. And I basically thought, initially, my instinct was, holy shit, this is a stolen car. This kid's just trying to flip this hot car and he's gonna take the cash. I'm gonna go ahead and try to register it. And the DMV is gonna say it's a stolen car. I'm gonna lose my ass on this thing. So I was instantly nervous. So I actually asked the guy straight up, I said, yo man, is this car stolen? Is this car hot? It seems like you're willing to sell it pretty quickly. And he said, no, I just bought this other car. I'm tired of having this second car around. And like you said, there's something wrong with the engine. I have no idea what it is. I just want to wipe my hands clean of this car. So if you're willing to give me $500 for this thing, I'm fine, I'm stoked on it. Please just take this thing off my hands. So I thought to myself, okay, he could be completely lying to me. This car could be stolen, but he did have a clean title for the car. He did have recent tags for the car. He did have receipts for the car, including that timing belt job done at a local shop. So long story short, I basically looked at him and said, okay man, let's make a deal. And I whipped out the $500, I gave him the $500, he and I shook the deal, we wrote it up, and I jumped in the car, he took off with the cash in hand, and I was basically gonna try to drive this sucker home with that knock sound. So I jump in, I head on the road, and the thing is knocking like crazy on the freeway on the way home. And I'm trying to keep the RPMs low, and this thing actually has pretty tall gears in the rear end of this driveline. So you're able to cruise at a pretty low RPM at like 60 or 70 miles per hour. It's actually quite a taller gear ratio than my Forester XT behind me or than any of my other Subarus I've owned. So I'm basically limping at home. I'm going like 60, 65 in the slow lane, the lowest RPMs I can keep on this engine to get home. The knock is like crazy loud, and I swear to God, as I was driving home, I thought the knock was getting louder, and I thought any second this engine's gonna blow, and I'm gonna be stuck on the side of the road towing home this $500 heap of Subaru front-wheel drive nastiness I just bought. So it didn't happen. I got home safe and sound. As soon as I got home, I parked the car in the back and I started taking stuff apart. So I start stripping down all those front components, right? I take off the alternator, I take off the power steering pump and all the belts, and I take off that front timing belt cover, and lo and behold, what do I see? The pin in the hydraulic tensioner is still in position. These hydraulic tensioners for these Subarus, they actually come locked and compressed with a pin that locks the piston for that hydraulic tensioner in the closed position. And that pin is in there to keep it closed so you can install the hydraulic tensioner and then install the belts and time everything correctly. And then after you've timed everything correctly and you double checked it, you pull that pin out of the tensioner, and then the tensioner expands under that hydraulic pressure, and that keeps a pressure on your timing belt. So that way, as your timing belt wears over time and actually stretches slightly, that tensioner will continue putting pressure on that timing belt, and it'll actually keep the timing belt with the same tension on all your pulleys. It's actually a brilliant design and works great. And in this case, the guys that had changed the timing belt and all the pulleys and the tensioner on this car had forgotten to pull that pin out of the hydraulic tensioner. So that hydraulic tensioner was locked in the closed position. Even though I had the timing belt on it and everything was timed correctly, it wasn't applying tension on the timing belt, so the timing belt was really loose. And believe it or not, this kid drove this car around for a few weeks, and I drove it 45 minutes on the freeway home with that pin still in that tensioner and that timing belt completely loose. And I'm so lucky that this sucker didn't skip a gear. But honestly, actually, even if it did skip a gear, this is a non-interference motor, which means that even if that timing belt did break, the valves wouldn't actually make contact with the piston. And that's a nice benefit of having a non-interference motor. They're actually not as efficient a motor design, The heads don't actually flow as well for these non-interference motors as far as I understand, but the really nice benefit of them is that if your timing belt breaks or any of your components fail in that timing belt assembly, those valves physically can't make any contact with the piston, and you're not going to cause any internal damage in that area of your engine. But that's a bit of a digression. So coming back to the story, after I saw that the pin was still in the hydraulic tensioner, I literally pulled the pin out, the tensioner expanded, the belt had tension on it, and I've been driving this car exactly like that for at least the last 3 years. I've probably put about 30,000 miles in this car. So that's the story of how I got this car for $500. It was actually a steal. I'm stoked on it. And the guy I bought it off of was happy to get rid of it too, and it was a win-win for both of us. All right, guys, that's it. I'm gonna wrap it up there for today. This is my quick little vlog, and the episode topic is my 1993 Subaru Legacy. I hope you guys enjoyed this little quick tour of a vintage 90s Subaru. It's got that vintage blue interior. It's got a bunch of other vintage elements like that automatic front seat belt. And I gotta tell you, everybody gets a big kick out of it every time they jump in that car for the first time. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Thanks for checking out the video. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and leave them in the comment section. If you liked the video, please go ahead and give it a like. And if you guys think this would be good for any friends in the Subaru community, please go ahead and share it with them. Thanks again for checking out the video, guys. Until next time, I'm Luke. This is the Subaru Only Show. Later.